Liane, welcome to the show. You have a new book coming out in 2 weeks. At the time of this episode going to be published, it's already going to be out. It's called Thoughtload. And on the front page, or I guess I'll say the front of your website, you had something I thought was very interesting, and it was the first thing I wanted to talk to you about. You say that the problem isn't the workload, it's the thought load. What does that mean?
It means that while we're overwhelmed and we're burning out and we feel like it's because we're doing too much work, it's actually really hard to do the work these days. And it's less about how much work we're expected to do and more about all the other stuff that's weighing on us that isn't the work that makes it hard to get to the work. So you can think of thought load as an invisible tax on your performance that's coming from crazy rising cognitive demands, like the stuff you're expected to pay attention to, like really out of control emotional burdens that we're all facing in this society these days, and then really quickly declining energy reserves. So the workload, most people I know would love to just be able to do the work. Everything else is really weighing us down.
Liane, what is burnout to you in your experience, and how can we help prevent it?
Yeah, so the World Health Organization finally came out and described this condition that is work burnout. And it's a variety of different pieces. So it's interesting because a lot of people talk about stress and burnout. In many ways, stress is the opposite of burnout. Stress is where our body actually rallies all its resources to protect us and to sort of go harder. Burnout is when we've been exposed to stress that we can't control for long enough that we eventually go the other way. We just stop. So we lose our self-efficacy. We start believing like, I'm not good enough. I can't figure it out. We lose our motivation to try anything. We start to separate ourselves from the work and feel more distant from it. So, stress is a normal, healthy thing that helps rally us when we need to deal with a difficult situation. But we're not built to stay in stress forever. And if we do stay in stress too long that we can't get out of, we finally kind of put up our hands and give up. That's burnout. Burnout, you will feel kind of a leaning back. Stress, you're leaning in.
Would you say that it's a short-term stress is good and a long-term stress is bad, or you think that there's a differentiation between long-term stress and burnout?
So short-term stress is there to protect you. Your body is really impressively able to take all its resources. And, we've all had to study for an exam or get a report in or do an important presentation where you feel that arousal of stress. And you're like, whew, that lit a fire under my butt. Thank goodness. That's positive. Eustress. It's like EUSTRESS. Eustress. It's positive. If we have stress for too long, and particularly stress over which we don't have any control, we aren't able to behave in a way that brings the stress down, that kind of stress where all of the neurotransmitters and hormones in our body are just in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode for an extended period of time, that's the really negative thing. Now, not everyone will end up with burnout because of that. Some people can go a long time in that very unhealthy way. Some may just go straight to a heart attack from there. They never burn out. They just pass out. And other people before, as a protective response, before they have the heart attack or drop, they will pull back and burn out.
Right. So going a little bit back to what you said, Leanne, we were talking about stress and how it is a good thing. It serves you, especially, I guess we can say, in the short term, right? Like,
In the short term.
I think I had the same experience where if I have a deadline that's in front of me, the stress gets me off of my butt and doing the thing, right? I remember I was listening to a podcast with you on, and you said something very interesting, and it relates to what we're talking about. You mentioned that there's a counterintuitive claim that you believe that action is the antidote to anxiety.
Yeah, for sure. So anxiety, first of all, the physiological experience of anxiety in our body, right? And then on top of that emotional experience, we have the feelings, which are the story we wrap around the physiological experience where we, come up with all sorts of drama and things like that. We will spiral in that. Sitting still allows anxiety to snowball. What you want to do is actually pick one manageable small thing that you can do to move forward, and the anxiety will start to come down. So yeah, for sure, the antidote to anxiety is action. But when we're feeling anxious, we often freeze, right? We just get stuck. So that's one of the reasons why we spiral downward. We've all done
Oh yeah.
it,
Oh yeah,
me
that's for sure.
included. Yeah.
So you mentioned how one of the things that you could do is have one small manageable task and kind of get the ball rolling. I find it really interesting. You have your doctor in, or you have a PhD in psychology, and your husband's a neuroscientist. So it's this amazing blend of like, I'm very interested in neuroscience. I love psychology as well. So it's really interesting for me to just imagine the combined like brain that you guys have, other than the idea of having, one small actionable thing that you can do fast, what are some other things from you, I guess, and your husband's expertise, not
Yeah.
that you can speak on his behalf, that you
Yeah.
can think of that would help
I've
people
had
take
32
action?
years of having that expertise whispered in
Yes,
my ear, so
okay, yeah, yeah.
I could probably do a decent job. Well, let's take the situation where you're having a big emotional experience, right? So first of all, it's really important to know that there's a difference between emotions and feelings. And most of us don't know that because the English language sucks for understanding the difference. Because if we're talking about our emotional experiences, our language for that is how do you feel, which is very confusing. So let's first start with we have emotional experiences, which are complex physiological reactions that come from, our past experience and context and whatever. Those are preconscious, non-negotiable. They're going to happen whether you like it or not. And they are filled with data, filled with interesting information about, what's going on in our context. Then we have this other thing, which is a feeling. And a feeling is a cognitive story or narrative that we tell ourselves to rationalize what we're experiencing in our bodies. So, Craig and I together, really understanding how this works. And while emotions are full of data, feelings are full of drama. We want to interrupt the process from having an emotional experience to weaving it into some grand fiction about how the world is out to get us or we're too stupid to do anything. We want to interrupt the emotions before they turn into feelings. And so, what we would both tell you is the best way to do that is to change the questions that you ask yourself and the order in which you ask them. So when you notice that you're having an emotional experience, so maybe your heart starts to race or your palms start to sweat, the first question to ask yourself is where, which is not like normally we go to why, like,
Yeah, that's what I was
why am
thinking.
right? That's of course
Yeah.
where we go first is why. And then we go to who. Whose fault is this? Who made me feel this way? So go first to where. So as you notice where in your body, do I have goosebumps? Like, am I having some kind of a reaction like that? Have I just noticed that my jaw is clenched so tightly? And as you notice where this is happening, there's this fascinating thing that happens, which is you notice that it's over there. And just noticing it's over there makes you realize it's not me. It's not, one and the same with me. It's this thing happening over there. That in and of itself can really help. We just create that little bit of distance. So after you've asked where and really like, oh, that's so interesting. My heart is really pumping or my palms are so clammy. Spend a few seconds there just noticing that. Then the second question is what? What is that emotion? So if you've seen Pixar's Inside Out or Inside Out 2, you've got the first set to choose from is this anger or disgust or joy. And if you can go a little bit more specific, like this is disgust. And, I'm really thinking that that person was so inappropriate. Like I'm embarrassed by how they're behaving. Okay. That's really helpful. So first where, then what? Then you can get to the why question. Like if me saying that's so inappropriate, what story am I telling myself that makes me embarrassed by their behavior? What's that about? What story am I telling myself? One of the most famous, easy, accessible examples is a parent whose kid is having a temper tantrum in the grocery store. I've been it, and we've all seen it. The parent who's getting more and more and more angry, they're getting red in the face, having this strong emotional reaction because their kid is on the floor. Well, the only reason that you're that upset is because you've decided that it's embarrassing that a kid throws a temper tantrum versus if the story you're telling yourself is, toddlers, gotta love them. This is what they're supposed to be doing at this age, figuring out who they are and how much control they have or don't have. So the story you tell yourself. So you started with where am I experiencing, then what, then why, and then you can move to, okay, what's one thing I could do that would actually make this better? Maybe what it is in the grocery store is just turning around the corner far enough that the kid can't see me anymore. It's amazing when you watch parents who do that and all of a sudden the kid notices that the parent's not there anymore. Immediately they stop crying and they're like up and on you go, right? So this is a really, really important discipline to teach yourself. So when I notice an emotional experience, I want to extract the data from it. Where is it happening? What is it? Why am I perpetuating that? And what's one thing I can do to move on from it? If you just practice doing that, it is amazing how much more in control you will be, and just how it lightens your thought load to know I don't have to be afraid of having an emotional experience because I'm really good at processing it. I can take it in, experience it, not be afraid of it, and move past it, as opposed to those who try and suppress it or pretend it's not happening or like choke their way through it. I, of course, am a crier. And I remember a phase where I was not comfortable with having emotions in the workplace. And you're trying to like look up to stop the tears and like blink, blink, blink. And you just look like an idiot, right? And it's very scary. And therefore the emotional reaction gets bigger as opposed to just, apparently I'm going to have a good cry now. Let me tell you what that's about, right? And on we go.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the where, the what, the why, and
Yeah.
then one actionable step we can take. Now,
Yeah.
how does this relate to organizations?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, that's where emotions are happening these days, right? Somebody doesn't love your proposal and you feel inferior or you feel like they're condescending to you. And all of a sudden in a meeting with everybody around you, you're having this emotional experience. And like, what are you going to do? Are you going to like run out of the room? Are you going to like pound the table and contradict them about why they're so wrong? Or are you going to process it and figure out, okay, what am I going to do with that? So that's one reason. The other reason it's really important is because there's a phenomenon going on in every group that we're ever in called emotional contagion, which is the emotional state of one person in the room spreads unconsciously to everybody else in the room. And unless we are more vigilant and more attuned to what's going on emotionally in the room, we're very susceptible to all of a sudden being taken down by by a colleague who's feeling really gloomy today or pessimistic.
Right.
So another reason it's really important in the corporation is to be able to spot it and know that, okay, that emotional experience, I don't want to have sympathy with that person. I don't want to feel the same thing as them. I want to be able to only appreciate it intellectually, empathizing with them to sort of feel for them instead of feeling with them. And then if I'm curious and intellectual and helping them, then I won't experience that same negative emotion as them. So there's a lot of reasons that getting good at processing both your emotions and those of the people around you has become a very essential skill in the workplace. So it's not one that very many of us have. We're pretty emotionally illiterate, most of us. But I
Sure.
think if we could increase our emotional literacy, working in groups of people would be a lot more pleasant.
Hmm. Leanne, I have so many questions, and like I'm thinking about how to word this. So my apologies if it doesn't sound like smooth, but so you're talking about emotional contagions, like not, I guess, catching other people's feelings. And then you also mentioned the four steps of
Yeah.
where, what, why, and then one
Yeah. Yeah.
actionable step. Are you
Yeah.
saying this from the lens of, let's say that somebody, an angry proposal, they don't like what you put in front of them.
Yeah.
Is the whole goal of doing this to be able to observe, okay, Elon's not happy with this proposal. Maybe it's not about me, or is more about understanding how to like navigate the culture. I don't know if that question made
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. So I would say, let me go with a third option. So if Elon doesn't like the proposal, first of all, I have to manage my own emotional reaction to what's going to feel like being not worthy. So we haven't added this piece to the puzzle. The other piece to the puzzle is humans experience what's called social pain, which is our brains experience pain, just like any other kind of pain, when we get information that we socially aren't worthy, we don't belong, we're not in the group. So the first thing I have to do is I'm going to be experiencing a lot of pain if I feel like you don't like my proposal, you think I'm dumb, you think it, right? So I first have to do okay, where am I experiencing that? Because probably in that case, my heart would start pounding, my thoughts would be racing. So I'd be like, okay, what am I experiencing? And then what is that? Well, I might feel embarrassed. That's one possibility, but I might also feel defensive. Different people or who you are relative to me or how I feel about the work may mean the difference between whether I feel embarrassed or defensive. Very, very different reactions. So I need to know which it is. And if I'm feeling embarrassed, that may be the why there might be because like yeah, I didn't work as hard on this as I needed to. I just did
Mm,
that with AI and didn't really check it thoroughly enough or whatever else. If I'm feeling defensive, it may be because, there was something in that that made me, I felt like it was my best work. And all of a sudden, if my best work doesn't measure up, now I'm worried about, do I even have a role here? Is my job at risk? So, going through all of that process is really important. So that's on my side. But now I have to worry about what's the dynamic between the two of us and how do I respond in a way that strengthens our relationship, increases our trust, gives us a path to a good answer instead of kind of blowing the whole thing up and having it be a really unhealthy conflict that isn't going to get us anywhere. So you need the emotional literacy first to kind of manage your own reaction, but then to stay in the game with the other person and figure out how do we move through this as allies who have different points of view as opposed to starting to see this as an adversarial situation. So there's a lot in it. There's a lot in it. But if you haven't managed your own emotional experience first, you're probably on the back foot for trying to have a constructive conversation with the other person.
sure. So you mentioned social pain, and one thing that I guess even backing up, so you coach a lot of high executives, right? I've seen you do talks at some amazing companies, amazing places. And I know, at least from speaking to CEOs or people that are higher up on the ladder, a lot of what their job has to do is less day to day and more driving the vision of what the
Yeah.
company wants, right?
Yeah.
So when you talk about the social pain that might come from a situation, especially when it comes to maybe people that are lower on the corporate ladder, I can imagine sometimes people would conform to how other people feel just so they don't feel like outside of the group. But the thing is,
Absolutely.
when you're an executive, what is the threshold between being able to lead a team into something that they think is the best while convincing them that, we're doing a 180, but this is for the best?
Yeah. So I think as I worked my way up the corporate ladder and working with more and more senior people, I thought that it would be more different than it is. So, my experience is CEOs are every bit as human and vulnerable as everybody else with more at stake. It's almost amplified as opposed to diluted by the level. So yeah, it's really, really important that they understand, how do they paint a picture of what's possible that other people can buy into? How do they help people to focus? Because one of the things that really leaves us with a very high thought load is a leader who's like, these are our 7 priorities. Well, priority is from the Latin word that means first. We can't have 7 priorities, so we can have 7 important things, but as a leader, I need you to help me understand what do I pay attention to first. Then leaders also have to understand whatever that change is they're envisioning is going to disrupt what you know and probably disrupt your sense of confidence or control. So are they anticipating that? Are they empathizing with that? Are they helping you to process your emotional reaction? Or are they encouraging you, it'll be fine? Are they just invalidating you or encouraging you to sweep that under the rug? So being a senior leader is a very, very hard job because you're managing your own thought load, which is very heavy. For a CEO, it's particularly heavy because you usually have a ton of pressures from external stakeholders, not just from internal stakeholders. You feel very beholden and accountable for what's going on, both for shareholders, your communities, your customers, your leaders, your people. So it's very, very heavy. So you got to manage your own thought load, but you have to be way more aware. And I wish that senior leaders were more aware of how their failure to make hard choices, their failure to confront the difficult issues is making the thought load unmanageable for their teams. It's a big problem right now.
For the higher executives, what are some things that they could be doing that would help them understand not only the principles you're talking about, but help improve their organization as a whole?
Yeah, just be out and about a little more than you are, right? And go out asking great questions. Questions that make it clear that the way your teams can help you is by helping you see things you don't know. So if I'm a CEO, I'm out there asking things like, what's one mistake we're making right now that I need to know about? What are we pretending isn't true? Right? Um, how is this playing out for you? What do I not see that I need to see? Like those kinds of questions that say, hey, if you want to suck up to the CEO, if you want to get the gold star here, don't get the gold star by kissing my butt. Get the gold star by giving me a piece of insight that nobody else is giving me. And just CEOs are in such rarefied air most of the time that they are not seeing what's actually in the thought load and actually asking that question, tell me about all the things that are in your thought load that I wouldn't know about. Like, what are all the things you're having to pay attention to? What are the things that are triggering for you that I don't see? Like, I know a lot about what's in your workload, right? But I am very naive about all the things in your thought load. Tell me what are the things that I could clear away for you to lower your thought load and help you to focus on the ways that you can contribute most, like all those kinds of questions. But how often are CEOs actually out there really understanding that from the folks who need them to understand it, right?
Yeah. In the beginning of the episode, Leanne, you mentioned that thought load is an increase. We have an increase of cognitive demands nowadays, increase of emotional burden, and less energy. So
Other than that, we're
understanding,
fine.
yeah, yeah, we're fine. We
Other than
got
that,
it.
it's great.
It seems like we're headed to the right direction. I'll definitely say no, but understanding this principle as managers, as higher executives, how can they, I guess, see that these things are happening and fix it? What are some
Yeah.
fixes?
Yeah. So the book lays out like very clear. So 12 very, so, 4-page little sections, 12 things you can do to make sure you're not the one creating the chaos. So how do you as a manager get your own thought load in check? And 12 things you can do to make sure that your team is set up to manage their own thought load. So the categories are focus their distracted attention, which means you better focus your own. And so a lot of the stuff there is about how do you help your team understand what's the most important outcome they're driving toward and make sure that their time and energy are allocated first to the most important outcome. Because most of our leaders are just paying attention to how active and how responsive their people are. And both activity and responsiveness will drive the exact wrong kind of thing. So the first section is really about doing that. Second, work on that emotional literacy. Work on making safe space for that emotional burden your team is carrying. Create the open forums and the psychological safety to have those conversations. And then third, think about your team's energy as a renewable resource. So right now, I think leaders are kind of asking their teams to sprint the marathon. And they're not thinking about what is good energy use. High performance people understand that rest is a part of high performance. Reflection is a part of high performance. It's not the reward after you've performed. So those three things, right? As a leader, you have so much responsibility for focusing people's distracted attention, for helping them to process their emotions so they can get beyond them, and for helping them tap into renewable sources of energy so that they can keep going over the long haul.
Yeah. Leanne, do you know Juliet Funk by any chance?
Yeah, I do. I do. Yeah, yeah. Juliet's great. We met at an industry association a couple of times, and her work about like the white space and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I am fully on side with Juliet's work. Yeah, she's
Yeah,
awesome.
what you were talking about earlier reminded me of that, just the idea that we get so busy and so caught up with our lives that we kind of forget that the rest is a part of recovery.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's both of those things are a massive part of performance. And it was really funny because I was watching the Olympic athletes this year at the Winter Games, and I was lucky to I have a friend, Sarah Wells, who's an Olympian. She was a hurdler, which blows my mind. And just when you watch how they perform at the elite levels they perform at, their focus is incredible. Right? They know exactly eyes on the prize, right? They're not doing other stuff when they're training. Like you can't reach them. Like they know what matters. And there's like one or two other things. They may, do a couple things for their sponsors because they need to pay the bills, but mostly they're ruthlessly focused. Secondly, they all have sports psychologists because they know there's a lot of emotional triggering going on, whether it's like I fell last time in practice or whatever it is, and then I need to process that so it's not with me.
Yeah.
And then watching how they train and how they rest, and they know exactly how they're resting. They've got those like wacky ice leg bags that they whatever else they're doing. And so high performance is the result of aggressively managing their thought load. So,
Yeah. You're right. Wow.
yeah, they really are masters at all three components of thought load, which is why they get the results they get. And
Yeah.
we just try and like, I'll just like pull an all-nighter, and it's like, oh, we're so stupid. We tell ourselves all the wrong stories about what it takes to create performance.
Yeah. What would be some of the stories that you would be telling yourself and other organizational leaders?
It's so busy right now. I can't afford to read my book tonight. Like I tell myself that story all the time. And I know, so we know that reading fiction promotes empathy, makes people more empathetic. And in my work as as a advisor to CEO, I need a lot of empathy. And I see times where I've been away from my healthy habits and I get less empathetic. Like, suck it up. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's what is the story we tell ourselves? The best story to tell yourself is it's so busy, I can't afford not to read my fiction tonight. Or if for you,
Okay.
it's like, I can't afford to go shoot hoops with the guys tonight because that's what's going to reconnect me. We'll have a laugh. I'll move my body. So that's the biggest one is we tell ourselves that when our companies are counting on us, that the right answer is to deplete ourselves, to burn ourselves out, to burn all the gas in the tank. That's just dumb. If our companies are really counting on us, we should be thinking about, well, this is my company's most important asset is my machine, both my brain and my body. What am I doing to make sure it's in top form for, like if we're coming up to the Monaco Grand Prix, they're not taking the F1 cars and figuring out how to like, oh, let's just go and bash them around. No, they're doing absolutely everything to make sure every little thing is ready for peak performance. We do the opposite. We tell ourselves this dumb story that we should just keep working and yeah, it's misguided. Let's just say it's misguided.
Yeah. I don't know. Quick side note, Leanne. I don't know if the basketball example was meant for me of saying like I'm too busy. I can't afford not to shoot hoops, but I'm 5'8", so that's not something that I have to deal with personally. But everybody everybody's got their own thing, I guess. So
Well,
it's an
usually
interesting statement.
I'll grab like a hockey. I'm such a Toronto girl. I'll grab like I can't afford to go out and play shinny with the guys or whatever. Basketball seems like a broader reference for
Yeah,
more
yeah,
people, but whatever it is, right? Like I'm going to yoga class tonight
right, of
because
course, yeah,
I, it's very easy for me to say, I'm in book launch time. I could spend that time tonight doing something to try and get one more buyer of the book, one more
right,
reader, or I could go spend an hour at yoga and have better ideas, be warmer, be more patient, be more insightful and creative for everything I do tomorrow. So, thankfully, when you write a book about something, it's great accountability for making good choices. Because people are like, Well, do you do that? So I'm proud to be able to say most of the time. Most of the time. But it's as much a struggle managing thought load for me as it is for absolutely anyone. But yes, I do feel this strong sense of accountability to not let down my readers by not making the deliberate effort to do the things that will keep my thought load in at least at a reason. I say like the difference between here and here is a big difference. So trying to keep it below the line of my nose so I can breathe.
I understand. One thing that I find really interesting, I think you've mentioned it so many times, it's kind of in my head. The best thing you can do, especially as a leader, is to first work on yourself. Like you're the prerequisite to help other people in the future.
Yeah, well, because a leader who hasn't managed their thought load is, creating a very large wake behind them, right? Because
Mm,
you don't know what to pay attention to. You're paying attention to everything, which means other people don't know what's important and what's not important. They're looking to you for that information about like, what should I worry about? If you are being triggered by things, losing your patience, getting frustrated easily, not being empathetic, well, then that emotional contagion, because we know that emotional contagion spreads from leaders even more rapidly than it does from anybody else. And if you're burned out and if you're like showing up, right, then, again, how are they going to have the energy? So,
right.
if you are the source of the chaos, you really need to get that under control first. Role model, not just a role model, but also to make sure that like the wake behind you is not so turbulent that, your team can't help but have a very high thought load. So yeah, got to start with yourself.
Right. Yeah. Because as a leader, I think people look to you to drive the mission. So if they see, like, I don't know, you have a project you're not excited about, why would they be excited about it?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah, or something you keep ignoring, maybe because it doesn't energize you or because it's really too hard or it's too contentious or you'd have to have some productive conflict to tackle it. If they see you avoiding those things, they just learn that well they don't have to do them either.
Right. Leanne, my last question to you. You've written multiple books, you've been on a lot of podcasts, you have a lot of speakings. But if everything was erased today and you could leave one message with the entire world, what would that
Yeah.
thing be?
Yeah, just that single word thought load, right? That's my gift is we never
Thank you.
had this word. And people keep telling me, like 2 weeks later, they'll be like, now that I have that word, I am making different choices. Like, I notice that I am being more deliberate about what gets in my thought load. I'm being more deliberate about taking something out of my thought load and finding a place to put it until I'm ready to deal with it. Or so if everything else was erased, all I want is for the word, and you can erase my name from it, but if the world has the word thought load and they start to understand that that's what they need to manage, I'm a happy girl.
Leanne, where can people find you at? Any links, any shout outs?
Well, it seems appropriate that they can find me at thoughtload.com. I also, lianedavey.com is my broader site, but it's easier to spell thoughtload.com. And then if anybody has a question or anything like that, connect with me on LinkedIn. And yeah, I would love to hear how does thought load play out for you? What works? What helps? Where are you stuck? Um, and at thoughtload.com, you'll see you can take a thought load audit that helps you assess which of the three pieces is driving your thought load. And then this wonderful assessment to show what's your unique kind of overwhelm. And then I can give you specific strategies tailored to your personal kind of overwhelm because we have very different types of overwhelm and ways it shows up. So thoughtload.com is the best thing. Connect with me on LinkedIn and we'll keep the conversation going.
To all my listeners, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys next Tuesday.